Uh, yes, go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Elizabeth Wafel, and I'm one of the co-chairs of Sustain St. Paul. And I want to welcome you all to the meeting. We're excited to have you all here, especially since it's kind of getting into the holidays. We're actually going to do people introductions after we have our speaker. So first thing I want to do is what we start every meeting off with, and I know most of you have heard this, but we always like to remind folks what's our mission, and it's right on our webpage. We champion abundant housing, low carbon transportation, and sustainable land use in the city of St. Paul through education, advocacy, and political action to ensure a more just and equitable city for all current and future residents. That's who we are, and that is what we do. We have an exciting meeting lined up for you tonight. Some of you who are here may have heard it. We've got a speaker talking about some sustainable bus stuff, and I'm going to talk briefly about our search for board members, and then we've got some really kind of, we're going to have Melanie's going to give us a little bit of a few highlights about what did we do well this year, which launches right into an activity that Karen organized. It's going to be fun and exciting. We're calling it the airing of grievances. And then we probably will wrap it up after there, but you never know. Maybe we'll have a surprise. So I'm going to hand it over to Melissa for introductions. I'm going to be listening, stopping my video as well to eat my delicious soup.
Grab your favorite beverage or food or pet or book. I don't know. Take whatever you want to be happy. We are happy to have Dan speak to us about representing the Metro Transit and the zero. I knew I was going to forget it if I didn't write it down. I'm so sorry, but basically about Metro Transit's zero emissions bus plan. And it's actually going to the legislature early next year. So Dan contacted us looking to do some outreach for our organization. And we know that this is a little bit of a tough time of the year, but again, we're recording this and hope that others will want to watch this afterwards. So we are very excited to learn about what Metro Transit's plan is to having zero emission buses. I mean, we know that that's something that would really help the air quality and therefore the livelihood of those that live in St. Paul and anywhere that Metro Transit serves. So Dan, thank you for being here. Take it away.
Thank you, Melissa. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. So as Melissa said, I'm Dan Pfeiffer. I'm with a firm called Zana Associates, and we're helping Metro Transit plan for zero emission buses. And my specific role is around engagement. So I'm leading the engagement efforts. So the zero emission bus transition plan is to establish a plan to move Metro Transit's fleet towards zero emission buses. Metropolitan Council is required to develop the plan based on the state legislature, and the first plan is due to the legislature February 15th, 2022. It will be a living document, so zero emission buses are a new and emerging technology, and so there is a plan that this document will be updated both as Metro Transit learns through implementation and as technology evolves. Really, the plan sets out kind of three categories, three timeframes. Define guiding principles. We've identified those guiding principles as technical viability, equity, and environmental justice, along with fiscal financial impacts. It'll set some milestones and goals. We're looking at the short term, so the next 5 years, the medium term, the 5 years after that, and then looking beyond those kind of initial 10 years into that beyond 2033 timeframe. And then developing strategies around service design, bus quantities, and along with charger types and locations. Couple terms that are very important to zero emission buses, and so that we can have the conversation and we're all coming from the same place. Zero emission buses are typically battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell buses. One thing to note, due to our climate, we will need to have auxiliary diesel heaters on the buses in order to maintain warm climate inside the bus when we are cold. So half the year, less than half the year, we will need those auxiliary diesel heaters. They take up very little consumption of diesel, but it is something that is needed. Otherwise, the electric heaters would drain the batteries and we'd really lose a lot of range. Another thing to note is that as of December 2020, only 3.5% of transit buses in North America are zero emission buses. It's a very new technology. Foothills Transit in Southern California, they are currently the longest operator of zero emission buses. So they have some battery electric buses that are approaching the 10-year time frame. It's important to think about that as we plan for the transition to zero emission buses, because federal guidelines for federal funding for bus purchases, they look at buses as having a life cycle of 12 to 14 years. So there's still a lot of learning about what that long-term life cycle costs could be. Another important definition is what is called a bus block. A bus block is an operational measure that's used to plan bus services. It is what one bus does in one day. It can be multiple operators, it can be multiple routes. There are approximately just under 1,200 weekday or total bus blocks in the Metro Transit system. You'll see that the average length is 133 miles, with the longest being in that 346 range and the shortest being 11 miles. They also range in the duration of time from, with an average of about 11 hours on the road, range from 1 hour to 22 hours out there on the road. And so the map on the right-hand side, those are 3 bus blocks from Metro Transit's current bus block system, showing what one bus does in a day, each of those colors. So the black line would be what that bus does in the day. So you can tell that it's not a single route, that it is operating more than that. And that becomes important as we think about operationally how to send out zero emission buses, because unlike a diesel bus where you can just fill it up with diesel fuel and send it on its way for 300 miles, we really have to factor in how long the range of the bus. So as we began developing the bus plan, kind of late July, early August timeframe, it's really guided by kind of a technical team, and really the technical team got together and developed these guiding principles. So technical viability, we really are striving to achieve a level of service where zero emission buses and diesel buses are referred to as just buses rather than a propulsion type. So really trying to get to that level where we can operate interchangeably, that we can transition, and we're not thinking about so much of the reliability concerns that may exist. Equity and environmental justice, so implementing and prioritizing zero emission bus service, reflecting transparent, fact-driven community engagement education. And that's part of why we're reaching out to community organizations. And I'll talk more details about that in a second. Along with targeting zero emission bus investment in communities where air pollution and racial disparities are the greatest, while also balancing the challenges of new technology. And then finally, operate and invest within fiscal means. So some of the benefits and challenges of battery electric buses. Benefits: less dependency on fossil fuels, fewer greenhouse gases. They are quieter vehicles. There's less vibration, some greater comfort. Challenges: technology readiness for vehicles and infrastructure. It is an emerging technology. Metro Transit did acquire 8 battery electric buses in 2018 timeframe for the C line arterial BRT line. Metro Transit has faced some challenges with the buses and with the chargers. It is one of those kind of to be expected that there are some learning pains and growing pains with new technology. And so getting through those and working through those. And fleet life cycle along with replacement timing, as I mentioned, the standard for buses is 12 to 14 years. And really, there hasn't been an agency in North America that's reached that kind of time frame. And so there's still a lot of questions and planning around that. And then some major facility and operational changes, as I talked about for the bus blocks, thinking about the range and operability and how do we plan for that. Many of you know that we have inequities in our region. So we have the fourth widest disparity in high school graduation rate, the second widest disparity in employment rate, and the widest disparity in household income and home ownership. And as we think about climate change and the impacts of climate change, the communities that are affected by these inequalities are also more likely to be affected by climate change and the impacts of climate change. And so we really want to focus on equity and environmental justice in our planning. One way to do that is to create an equity score. And so on the screen, this is a calculation that's borrowed from Cal EnviroScreen. It's just an example. It's a way to take population characteristics and environmental factors and create an equity score. And so as a team, we looked at the Metropolitan Council's equity considerations data set, and we identified some categories, some data points for population characteristics, along with environmental factors that could be used to develop a equity score calculation. So the next two slides I'm going to go through kind of talk about weighting of those scores. And so if we provided equal weights to those scores on the map, you'd see that kind of higher equity prioritization score would be in pink, followed by the darker green, the lighter green to the gray. And so as we think about how to weight these categories, we've really reached out to public. We had a survey that was open November into mid-December. It just closed last week. Some of you may have participated in the survey. We also held some stakeholder workshops and continue to engage neighborhood organizations. One of the questions, and I will ask this question in a couple slides, is how would you weight? What categories would you give the highest priority to? And we are using that data to create the equity prioritization score for Metro Transit's zero emission plan. And so in this example, we weighted BIPOC communities and cancer risk higher. And so you can see how, if I go back and forth, you can see how you see a change in really primarily the pink, but you can also see it in some of the dark green where those priorities would come out. So the calculation scores that we identified, the characteristics, population density, percent Black, Indigenous, people of color, percent zero car households, percent housing cost burden. So that would be those that are paying more than 30% to housing costs. Number of years, areas of concentrated poverty. So Met Council uses a measure areas of concentrated poverty. So this would be the number of years that census tract has been in that measure. And then environmental factors, average land surface temperature on a hot summer day. It's a proxy for the heat island effect. And then lifetime cancer risk from inhalation of air toxins. So for those that are interested, if you have a smartphone, or if you could go to open up a browser and go to menti.com and enter 17242831. I'll put it in the chat also. I'll change it and we can do a little bit of the weighting right this second. So this is one of the things that we've been asking at our presentations to participate in. So those that are interested, I'll give it a minute or two as we go through that.
Dan, could you just show that code once more, please?
Yep, sorry. Menti.com 17242831, or you can, if you have a smartphone, you can use the QR code on the right hand side. So give it a few seconds. Percent zero car households, number of years, areas concentrated poverty. So it's these. So based on the kind of 5 people that have completed it so far, so the top 3 are the same top 3 that we are seeing after aggregating across over 300 surveys. They are just in a different order than what we are seeing. So it's very similar. The only other question that I have is, what other equity or environmental justice measures do you think Metro Transit should consider? So you could also chat these, or I think you might be able to unmute.
Yeah, I'll go. I would say making sure that other forms of low carbon transit, like especially bikes, have better sort of crossover with buses. Whether it's making sure that places there are bike lanes also are places where there are bus stops, and making sure that all buses and like all transit vehicles are really bike friendly. That would be important to me.
Okay. Any others? Anyone wishes to share?
Suzanne put a question in the chat, Dan.
Yeah, so the question is, the object of the question, how Metro Transit should locate the zero emission. Yes. So the next kind of steps is, as we start to implement and transition more of the fleet to zero emission buses, there is some prioritization that will occur as that occurs, because as I mentioned, the life cycle of a bus is 12 to 14 years. So Metro Transit has a kind of a capital investment plan. And so over time, the buses, as they buy zero emission buses, it's which areas should we prioritize first, knowing that we don't distribute buses based on routes, they're based on those blocks. And so being able to select out a set of blocks that would fit for the zero emission buses. So there's kind of some operational challenges as we do that transition that Metro Transit's really working on the planning for. And so that's one of the ways to think about it. So which neighborhoods would be prioritized? So our next steps, so we're continuing our technical analysis. We're also drafting the plan. The plan will be submitted to the legislature by February 15th. And so that will set up for kind of the next steps in implementation. There is a lot more. I saw some of it in the chat. There is more funding for zero emission buses that's in the recent transportation funding at the federal level. And so some of that is figuring out how to submit for the grants. There's a federal program around low emission, no emission buses. And so there is some of that. The next kind of plan that's in place that was in the Metro Transit's recent capital investment plan is for 8 40-foot zero emission buses. And so that would be a pilot to test those and have some learning on those before the next acquisition. So learned quite a bit from the 8 60-foot electric buses that were purchased for Sea Line, and kind of building through that process and being very methodological. Oh my God. Methodological about
Methodical.
Yeah, methodical. I so can't say that word right now.
I couldn't say zero emissions, so there's that. So
I will stop sharing if anyone has any other kind of questions. Try to look at the chat.
Could you maybe I missed this, like how many buses get replaced in a given year? And is it an even amount, or is there sort of like a glut, like in one year you got to replace like 20% of the buses?
So Metro Transit owns over 900 buses. And so buses are typically, they put in purchase orders for them. And so the buses that are bought, say in 2022, would be delivered in 23 to like 2025. So oftentimes they buy kind of a set amount with options to purchase more as needed. And it really depends on the life cycle of the buses, of the existing buses. Because so in order to have federal funding involved in it, you have to maintain that kind of replacement cycle along with a fleet of good repair, a state of good repair. And so they start to transition buses that hit that 12 to 14 year, they start to plan out those purchases. So it does take time, and it's not going to be likely not going to be that you can't just buy all zero emission buses, because then in 12 to 14 years, we'd have to buy all new ones again. And so Metro Transit really is planning out those kind of purchases. Some years they don't buy any buses. And so it's kind of staggering those out.
So maybe also tying into what Steve was saying, is there any special training or resources that drivers need to be able to operate the new buses, or is it an easy transition for them?
So there is some training. So one of the things that does, zero emission buses, battery electric buses are more, they have more of a limited range versus diesel. You can't just, a diesel bus, you can fill up with diesel and it'll run 300 plus miles easy. Battery electric bus, you're starting, once you start to factor in some, looking at the weather conditions, kind of factoring that in, you might be in that 130 range as your kind of your max range that you're thinking about. But if it's hillier, it would use up the battery faster. There's all these kind of like little things that can wear, if you think about the use of your phone, those kind of things and how they're affected. I mean, battery electric buses have the same kind of draw on them. The more hills can reduce that range. So there is some around training drivers to make sure that, how to use them. There is some with the buses on C-Line. They do have on-route chargers. So if you've ever been to the Brooklyn Transit Center, there is a charging system. So it looks like a barber pole sitting up in the air, kind of it curls over. And there's a charging pantograph that comes up off the bus and connects to it when they park, and they can charge while they're laid over. The new buses, the next round, the plan is to have all garage-based charging rather than route charging. There is some challenges with the infrastructure around that. As you can imagine, it's not just plugging in to an outlet. And so there is some training to it.
Yeah, so then also from the chat, Susan says that it seems like the high density corridors, for example, Lake Street, which is a great example, with poor air quality would be prioritized, which kind of falls into that survey that you were doing. And then Jack asked, what happens to the buses once they are past their useful life? Which is a super great question.
So they, Metro Transit does auction them off. They go the same way the state sells off old vehicles. There's like an auction process. Some are saved, some are kind of saved for parts, essentially, to keep the others going. But they do, every once in a while, they do hold an auction and sell off old buses. I don't know the frequency of that process. I just know that it does occur. I know there's at least one nonprofit in town that bought an old bus and converted it into a kind of grocery store for produce that would travel around to neighborhoods that were kind of food deserts. So I have heard that in the past.
Ooh, that could be another criteria, providing access to services using zero emission buses.
So, other than that, any other?
Yeah, I was gonna say, anybody else got questions about this awesome plan that Dan's talking through? It's great to hear that it's going to be iterative. So
Yeah, there's going to be time, it's going to take some time to do the transition. And the other thing to mention is that, as I mentioned, battery electric buses, zero emission buses are either battery electric buses or hydrogen fuel cell. One question that I do get asked is about the hydrogen fuel cell. That's even smaller of a percentage of the existing zero emission bus fleet because it's a very new technology. It's even newer than the battery electric buses. And so part of the iteration is as that technology emerges, that might be something that's looked at in 5 or 10 years as being more of an option to use than battery electric buses.
cool.
I had a question about the wait time, or charge time rather. So in an average bus block, is there enough downtime that, theoretically, if the chargers were already in the right place, they would be able to maintain the current routes? Or would that be route change too?
Well, so the way the bus blocks work right now, without operational changes, the technical team identified almost 50% of the blocks would meet the criteria for as being an option. That's without taking into consideration some other operational challenges, such as where the buses are located. We do have to look at the garages and what the electrical capacity at the garages are, along with kind of working with XL Energy on where they have capacity in the system for it. So there is some, as we're identifying where the next buses are going, it's where they will live and charge at, and make sure that XL Energy has the time it needs to make sure that the power is available to do it. Because there is, the capacity is a concern. And so the new bus garage in Minneapolis, which is kind of by Target Field, it's one that's on a site that Metro Transit bought years ago, is under construction right now. That one's envisioned for battery electric buses. So it does have electrical service needed. It has space for the chargers. It has solar panels on the roof. It has all these kind of options. But one of the other items is kind of the volatility in the electrical marketplace. And so there's some smart charging technology that needs to be put into place so that you're charging off peak. If you've ever looked at that, and kind of home electricity use and how there's on peak and off peak times, and smart charging technologies that allow you to charge a bus at the lowest rate to try to benefit that kind of stuff.
Cool. Well, I'm not seeing a lot of other questions, so let's give Dan a big virtual round of applause. I think it's very interesting. I'm glad that the legislature kind of asked you to do this, and we'll be looking forward to more updates in terms of how this moves forward. So
yeah, this won't be the last time that Metro Transit reaches out as we continue this process and continue through kind of the transition towards more zero emission buses.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Dan. We appreciate it. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you want. So
Thank you for having me.
yeah, take care.
Take care.
Okay. I'm going to move along to the next item on the agenda, and I'm going to keep this short because it's just not as exciting. And what that is, we just want to talk about our upcoming board recruitment. So as you may or may not know, we have our elections in January, and this, I'll tell you, as much as I love this organization, I've been on the board for like 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years. And so I'll be stepping down. We've got some openings, and it's really important that we recruit new members. We are particularly looking for new board members across the city. This organization started as Sustain Ward 3, and we've tended to be heavy in that area. So we're Not that we're not going to accept folks from Ward 3, but we are definitely looking to sort of do a very geographical spread, diversity on all counts, and whatnot. So if you have, no matter where you live in the city, if you have any interest in applying, we are going to have a meeting in January on January 6th at 7 p.m. and we'll have the details posted, and it's going to be a recruitment meeting. One of the reasons we're doing that, if you know anything about our organization, then there's two main requirements for being on our board. And the first one is you have to sort of believe in and accept our mission. I mean, I think that obviously goes without saying with any board. The second is that you're supposed to have attended 2 meetings within the last year. And we're recognizing that, you know, again, as we're trying to recruit a more diverse board, not everybody's made our meetings. And so this January 6th meeting will count. So if we can't talk you into getting onto our board, but you know friends who might be interested, they can make the 2 meeting requirement by attending this January 6th meeting and then our meeting at the end of the month, where we'll be doing the elections. And if you like our organization, but don't want to be on the board, because, you know, board work can be, you know, it's board work. It's exciting, but not everyone wants to do it. We will still have opportunities for non-board members to get engaged. I know I plan on being still involved in the organization, but not in a board role. So just wanted to update you on that. If you have questions about being a board member, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to any of us on the nominations committee. That would be myself, Melissa Wenzel, who's represented by our crafty little logo there, or Melanie Day. But we are, like I said, looking for folks anywhere and everywhere who are really supportive of our mission and willing to kind of dig in and help us work. So with that was exciting enough about the board, but what's going to be really exciting is Melanie talking about what we've accomplished over the last year. Melanie, take it away.
Well, thanks, Liz, for setting me up so well. And I am just really thrilled to be able to talk about what Sustain St. Paul has accomplished in 2021. And perhaps I should ask Karen if you wanted to start something before I start going through our top 7 list.
Yes, so this is our moment to do a little airing of our grievances or a little celebration of what we've achieved, or for those of you that read the newspaper, our sainted and tainted. So I'm going to put a link in the chat, and it's an opportunity for you guys to just like type in things you think that have been a big success in terms of like sustainable land use or, you know, low carbon transportation, or opportunities you think that we might have in the future, or things that have been a colossal failure. Just your thoughts about 2021 and looking into 2022. And I'm going to share my screen, and then your thoughts are all going to bloom into a beautiful word cloud. So please put, you know, whatever comes to mind. You can make as many comments as you want. And while we're watching it, Melanie will go into what we see as our big wins for 2021.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a quick question on that, Karen, just to clarify 2 things.
Yes.
You're talking about the things that relate to our mission, but do they have to be things that we specifically did? Okay, so it's things that either at a St. Paul level, or perhaps a Ramsey County level, that happen with respect to sustainable land use, transportation, or housing. So we talk about what was great, what was not great, and if we worked on it, great. If not, maybe it wasn't great because we didn't work on it. Who knows? Okay, cool. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Awesome.
So
well, with that,
there's the link, although it's not linking.
Oops. Is the link working? Well, I'm going to try to do my best impression of an NPR host. So just consider yourself to be listening to NPR and doing a little homework on the behalf of Sustain St. Paul. Hopefully the link is working for you all. So there are 7 key accomplishments that I would love to highlight for Sustain St. Paul in 2021. First one is we launched our new mission and vision in January of this year. Wow, it's hard to believe. That was 11 months ago. Second accomplishment was that in March, we launched action squads around parking minimums and zoning, leveraging the passions and experiences of our members. The third key accomplishment is that throughout the year, we provided our members with virtual events and pathways to connect with their local government and to influence discussions about public policy. The fourth accomplishment was actually a party. In late July, we hosted an in-person summer social in Crosby Park and had a great time chatting with our members in real life. Our fifth accomplishment was actually something the city of St. Paul did based on our advocacy work. The city of St. Paul, as many of you I'm sure are aware, perhaps all of you are aware, eliminated parking minimums on August 18th. And our advocacy of our members was absolutely a key success factor for that decision. The sixth accomplishment is we hosted a discussion about rent stabilization and joined a coalition of like-minded organizations to endorse rent stabilization, which was passed by St. Paul voters on November 2nd. And finally, our last accomplishment, our seventh accomplishment, is we have had a nearly 10% increase in our newsletter subscribership, and we've connected with more and more people. So I could say the Sustained St. Paul movement has momentum and it's continuing to grow. And that's the top 7 list.
Awesome, Melanie. Thank you for sharing. I love seeing the word minimums show up so many times because I think the elimination of parking minimums was like a game-changing success for us, for St. Paul, for maybe cities across the US who could also consider eliminating their parking. Yeah, so keep everyone throwing out your wins and your, I don't want to say losses. I don't think we lost anything. Your saints and your taints. I'm surprised no one has put a lattice project on here or like district councils.
I'm going to log into your presentation here so I can throw some things in here.
Elizabeth, do you want to share any of your favorite grievances or bloating?
Sure. I'm going to start with my favorite. I do think elimination of the parking minimums was a big deal. It's something that we have been long supportive of, and I think it's going to make a real difference in the city. And it was really, really great to see that happen. So that would be my sort of number one thing that happened this year, although other great things happened. I would say my biggest frustration this year, and I had typed it, but apparently it doesn't allow you to type sentences in, which I guess makes sense with the word cloud, but I wasn't thinking about it. But I would say probably my biggest disappointment was the district court that tossed out the renters ordinance, because we had worked on that, what I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. And, you know, and I totally get why the city council said, okay, we got to go back to the drawing board. But I'm frustrated that, you know, I thought that was a real good advancement for renters. So I thought that was a bummer, but I am excited to see, new aspects of the bike plan going forward. If any of you've been down by the Ford site, and that's really why this group started in the first place. I guess it's not called Ford site anymore, the Highland Bridge. That was really how Sustain, originally Ward 3, came together. And it's great to see stuff happening there. A little disappointed at the opening price on the row houses, but that's a different story. So a couple exciting things and a couple things to taint, I guess you would say.
Yeah, sort of in the same vein as the Highland Bridge site is Hillcrest, I think is a huge opportunity that we have going forward. And also Boys Totem Town is another opportunity for 2022 and beyond. And it looks like Zach raised his hand. Zach, go ahead.
Hi. So this, for me, just this year was my first time getting involved in any of this kind of advocacy or anything like this. And I've only lived in St. Paul for, I'm just in my sophomore year of school now. So it's been super exciting for me. It's a lot of fun here. And I'm also on the Mac Grove Council, where we've done some, approved some developments, and also we're talking a lot about the parking minimums, and we voted halfway. We voted for the reduction at the council, but fortunately we got the full elimination anyways. And then also one really exciting thing for me was with Luke and Kevin and Will, we all just last month were able to have a meeting with our Councilmember Tolbert. Sorry. And that was like super awesome to me. Just it's very exciting to be engaged in this, and looking forward to maybe what happens with the single family zoning stuff in the next year. So yeah.
That is awesome. So Sainted is getting involved, making new connections, and being a part of the community, and we appreciate that, Zach. Anyone else want to share their Saints? I see I-94 on the word cloud. I'm hopeful, but also skeptical about the Rethinking 94 project that's going on. Does anyone want to share their opinions on that? Or not, that's fine. Yeah, this looks like our word cloud. Oh, I see somebody in the chat. Yes, Zach, I'm hopeful. That's great. Maybe some zero emission transit along I-94 would be an option. Cute, this is fun. That sort of wraps up this activity, really. Melanie, do you have any final words you want to add?
Well, for me, it's just a pleasure to be able to work with this group of like-minded individuals that really want to advance progress, sustainable progress for all in our city. And it's pretty awesome. But, also if we need to vent a little bit about some of the things that we're up against, this is officially a Festivus organization, or Festivus celebration tonight here on solstice evening. So, vent in the chat a little bit if you like, think about Seinfeld and Festivus and bring out the poll, bring out the grievances. Yeah. So, feel free to just let them rip, because you all might have a few things to get off your chest before, we go into the long holiday weekend. And I'll hand it back to you, Karen, or maybe to you, Elizabeth, or to you, Melissa.
Well, it is, we don't want to, well, I want to say, thank you for everyone who's participating. And I do want, again, the chat is open. We had thought about adding another game, but we figured it being so close to the holidays, no one wants to spend any more extra time on the screen than they wanted to. We want to encourage all of you to, again, think about whether or not you, oh, we've got some, we're going to bring them up in a second. I was dancing here. So I want to, again, encourage any of you to either join the board or help us recruit members for the board, or tell us, quite frankly, if you don't want to be on the board, tell us how you'd like to get more involved. But we've got two topics here, and I am I'm gonna start with Zach's first, because I'm from Matt Groveland too, and so is Jack, and I know that the two of us can appreciate what Zach is saying, and his minor grievance nuisance is the same three people who come to every Matt Groveland housing and land use meeting to complain about parking. I'm going to second that grievance. I don't know if Jack wants to second that as well, but I agree with
it's almost a norm that there are certain people, not always the same. The first question they'll ask about every development, and I've learned to try to even preempt this by saying, before people complain about what is the status, because if I don't ask, someone else will. It's like the be all end all to everything is parking. It's a grievance, but there's also an antidote. What I keep trying to do with not much success is try to educate people, like the place you're complaining about parking is 1 block from a transit line. Have you thought of using that? just a little reminder, there is an alternative to driving and parking. Really, it sounds stupid, but people in Mac Grove are so conditioned to driving and parking everywhere almost as an entitlement. I've listened to this for 20 years. It's not going to change in my lifetime. But yeah, you get used to it after a while.
Suzanne or Susan, I'm going to say Suzanne. She I like your description there, Suzanne. Why don't you explain your comment? I like it.
Well, it's like it's really hard to think of a solution to I-94 as it is. And I'm fortunate that I don't have to use it hardly at all anymore unless I'm like headed out of town. Hello, Bobby. I know a number of people here. You should go next. But I think I hear discussion. I've read some articles about, should it become sort of a boulevard? And I find it hard to envision that as well, just because of the volume of traffic it carries. I really think that the best solution for I-94 is to kind of bridge as much of it as possible, like what was done with I-35 in Duluth, and maximize the green space on top of it. But it's just a really challenging problem. I know there used to be an express lane for buses, and then that was removed. I think it was after the I-35 bridge collapse. And yeah, the Rondo Land Bridge. So, and since then, you can try to take transit, and it's probably the quickest way to get between the downtowns, but you're going to get stuck in the same traffic that everybody else is. So anyway, just some thoughts about that.
Thanks, that we appreciate your thoughts on that. I think it is going to be a challenging thing to tackle. Karen did mention maybe Rondo Land Bridge Highway Lit is one way we deal with it. Bobby Scott, so you are running into lots of smoking on the green line, and I would I'm going to say that that means that you are actually riding the bus, Bobby. So that's, or the green line. So that's good. But sorry to hear that you're encountering smoking, because nothing is worse. Well, there are worse things. But Bobby, commenting on that, and anybody chime in on something we can do about that grievance.
Well, so I'm half a good person because I live on the Far East Side, and I actually drive to Raymond, and then I take the green line to the U. Because if I took a bus and a train, it would take me forever to get to the U. But I've run into a lot of smoking or people playing music or their video games or whatever. And there's graffiti that shows up, and I don't know. It's just it's disappointing.
Yeah, I feel like we could all relate that, disruptive experiences on transit make it harder. Just like you want to be able to just go and relax and let the bus driver drive you. And just like when you're taking your car and there's disruptive other drivers on the road, you just wish they would just move out of the way and let you drive in peace. And that is sort of the curse of transit, is if we all could just stay home and avoid other people, we wouldn't have to deal with it.
And Suzanne, you're right. I think the East Side is not probably as well served with transit as it should be. I think it sounds like there's some projects in the work to make that better, but totally legit. Jack pointed out that I-94 tools would reduce demand, and I think Jack could be right. Tools are an interesting tool. There's good and bad with them, but I think they're an interesting tool. Who else? Any grievances? Anything else?
I have another grievance.
She's on a roll. Woohoo!
So now the ball's rolling and we may not leave. No, so the Gold Line, the bus rapid transit. I mean, it takes so long for any of these to come to fruition. And I don't quite understand why it has to take so long. So the Gold Line theoretically is gonna, you know, it's gonna make getting from the east side downtown, you know, faster and so forth. But we've still got a few years before it's even gonna open, I think. And it seems like if we want people to take transit, new lines need to come into being faster.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, hey Karen, I'm wondering if we can take down the little sign and have it so we can see everybody at once. Or is that possible? Awesome. Anybody else have any grievances or things they're looking forward to from a sustainability point happening this year? No? Well, trying to think, is there anything else we need? Melanie, Karen, or Melissa? Anything else you want to say before we wrap up the meeting? And I'm giving everybody, again, tap dancing last chance on the opportunities and grievances, things you're looking forward to. Well, I'm not hearing much else. Jack, any grievances? Nah, you're good. That's why we love you, Jack. Okay, guys. Well, I want to thank you again, especially during, I know this is a tough week for everybody, for you coming out. I think it was really good to hear from the bus from that Metro Transit. We'll be getting that out there, and we have a lot of exciting work to be looking forward to in 2022. Again, we're gonna have new, exciting, and hopefully better members on the board. You know, not that our current board isn't great, and I'm hoping to get new members involved. We got, you know, the zoning changes happening. Hopefully things with the bike plan will be ramping up, which Lord knows I'm excited about, and just a lot going on in St. Paul. So big thanks to everyone. And Melissa, Karen, Melanie, your last chance, or are we good? Okay, well then I'm gonna let Melissa call it a meeting because she's in control of the Zoom. Maybe she's still eating. Melissa, are you still eating? Well, thank you. I guess we can leave. We can just wait and see her and see if she ends the meeting, or we can all just leave. So, oh, did you have a question, Suzanne? Or are you just applauding? You're just applauding. Okay.
No, I'm just applauding.
Well, thank you. Again, we appreciate y'all being here. We can all, it's that awkward thing of we all have to figure out where's the leave button on our computer. I believe it's in the right-hand corner, so we can all leave and then Melissa will find herself. And yes, we love fun, short meetings, so thank you. Okay. We'll talk to you guys later and hopefully see you in January.